Hey guys, welcome to another video. So today we're going to be doing a character trope tier list. So I'm going to be ranking the best and the worst character tropes of all time. Originally I had a really cool outro here recorded where I showed, hey, we've got this trope and we got this trope, and I showed some of the highlights and the funny moments from this video. But my editing program crashed on me and I have edited this entire video, not even exaggerating, probably between 10 to 12 times. And I just want to get the video done at this point. It's not for lack of effort, please trust me. But I really hope you guys stick around to the end, because I've worked so hard on this video for 3 days of hours and hours and hours of editing when I probably should be writing and stuff. But I have spent so much time on this video, so please watch the whole video to the end. I promise you won't regret it. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get right into the tier list. Hey everyone, welcome to another video. So on YouTube, I watched this one YouTuber called Daniel Green, and one of my favorite types of videos that he does is a trope list. So I've done one of his before. I don't remember if I've actually posted that video or not, but if it is, it'll be down in the description below. So I recently discovered that he did another one called Character Trope, and so basically it's a tier list. So today I'm going to be listing out all these character tropes and putting them in the tiers based on how much I enjoy them and what I think about them and stuff. And I'm going to talk about them from a writer's point of view and an author's point of view, and what I personally think of each trope. So most of these tropes have little pictures on the squares, as you can see on the screen here. They represent different character type tropes, like fish out of water. That would be a character who doesn't feel like they belong. And so we're going to talk about each of them. So let's just get right into this. I'm so excited, and let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. I'll also have a link to Daniel's video on this when he went through the trope from his perspective as a reader, and I'll also have a link to the tier list itself so you can kind of do it yourself if you want to, if you disagree with anything I'm saying or anything Daniel says. So all that will be in the description of this video. Before we get started, please like this video. It really helps me out. Be sure to subscribe for more writing videos every Monday. So let's get into it. Alright, so this first one is basically hired muscle. And so essentially that's basically kind of self-explanatory, where your bad guys hire muscle in order to like fill their army or whatever. And so honestly, I didn't know this was a trope because it's just kind of like always there, and I honestly don't know how you would write a good villain, especially if you're doing an action book, without the other fill-in kind of type bad guy characters. So you're going to always have, even if they're not like hired muscle, like say you have a villain and the army are all citizens of that kingdom and they're all completely loyal to him, you're still going to have those extra soldiers that are kind of filling up the bulk of the army. You're going to have that pack of bandits that's going to cause your character trouble. I don't know if those technically count as this trope because I just write books. Like, I don't pay attention to tropes because I just write what I like, so I'm not an expert, which is kind of funny considering I'm an author. But hired muscle, that's what this one represents. And I personally don't know how you would write a book without it, so I'm putting it in the S tier, which for reference, S is like the best, and it goes down from there, D being the worst. So in my standard, C is going to be just kind of that okay-ish kind of ones. I don't hate them, but they're not my favorite. B is sort of like the bottom tier in terms of my liking one. A and S are like really good. And again, B is just the average ones, and then C is kind of like, nah, you know, and then D are the ones that I absolutely hate. So C would be ones that are just okay, not that great, but not bad, and then D are the ones that are terrible, just for reference. So I'm going to put hired muscle in the S tier because I feel like it's a backbone, and I think Daniel mentioned something like it's a foundation, and I feel like that's true. Like, you have to have, if you're doing an action book or an adventure book, your villain has to have those goons to kind of fill out the army. You have to have goons for your good guys or your heroes to fight against, to take out. You have to have the goons that cause your hero some trouble and give yourself some time for your characters to encounter them. So that's why they're going in S tier. So this one I didn't understand, actually, and I've watched Daniel's video and I still don't really get what this trope is. So I think it's like, You guys are gonna kill me.
One eternity later.
Okay, so it's called Femme Fatale. I don't know what that is, so I'm actually gonna Google it. It seems like kind of that mysterious, beautiful character.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new...
A femme fatale, sometimes called a man-eater or a vamp, is a stock character of a mysterious, beautiful, seductive woman who charms and snare her lovers, often leading them into compromising, deadly traps. He mentioned that this could also be a male character, but I'm assuming it's more than often a female. I personally prefer a female versions of this. I find the male ones a little weird, but I don't think I use them too often, but when I do, I really like using them. I feel like if I ever do a female villain, it's always a femme fatale for some reason. Now, I'm not saying that based on the definition that I've recently learned, I don't think they're always villains, so they can probably be basically just mysterious and kind of have that mentality where they just kind of like seduce your main characters and stuff. And of course, I don't include like dirty stuff in my books, but they can have that like allure and stuff like that. So if I do include this, it's usually a female character who is a villain, so I always do bad versions of this, but I do like it, so that's definitely an A tier for me. So this one is The Companion. Now I personally love this. It's one of my favorite tropes of all time. I don't know a good book where you can have without a companion. Personally, I like when the companion's also the main romance because I get hooked into the ship. So even if I write, like, even in my fantasy books that are just regular fantasy or action books, usually I'll still have my main protagonist have a love interest as a companion because I can't write a book without a good romance in it, and I feel like the best companions are the lovers. And so whether it's a female protagonist who has a male boyfriend, or whether it's a male protagonist that has a female girlfriend, whatever, it's a really exciting trope. But even like the friendships between just the friendships that you can have are really good, and I feel like really good companions are good. You can have animal companions. I've had one in the Valiant series, Warrior. They had bonds with animals, and the animal companions to the two main characters in that one were so much fun, and I feel like it added a whole new layer to the book. The first one that comes to mind with this trope is actually Lord of the Rings with Frodo and Sam. Sam is like the best companion of all time, so that one's definitely S tier for me. Okay, so this next one, I believe this one was anti-hero, which we have another type of hero that's similar but different, which is the reluctant hero. And in Daniel's video, he kind of explains the difference between the two, but an anti-hero is like a hero character who like doesn't really, they do heroic things, but they take it too far. So I would call Batman a anti-hero. I love anti-heroes. From the Valiant series, my character Aiden is an anti-hero. For a bit, I would say, yeah, I'll just stick with that. Aiden is an anti-hero. So a lot of my characters have that strict no-kill policy, and Aiden used to be an assassin, so his first thought is, okay, we gotta kill everybody. And my other characters are like good, and they're like, you can't do that, like you can't just kill people. And so I would say I love a good anti-hero. I would classify Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars before he turns to the dark side as almost an anti-hero. He is a hero, but there are times that he does cross a line and do things that the Jedi Council doesn't like or wouldn't do. And so I would say he has a little bit of anti-hero tendencies. And I'm going to skip ahead a bit because this is the reluctant hero. For now, that's going to go there, but we'll adjust it later. So the reluctant hero is a character who is a hero who doesn't really want to be a hero. So they've been called upon, they've been thrust into the situation, and they're called upon to do an heroic act or whatever, or save the world, and they don't really want to, and they're kind of pushed into it. I don't think that I've ever done a reluctant hero, not that I can think of, and I don't know that I remember any instance of it being used. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. I really can't think of a reluctant hero, to be honest. If you know any, put them in the comments below. But basically that's the difference between them and the anti-hero. The anti-hero is a hero who is doing the heroic things, but they take it too far and they do too many bad things. Like they do the heroic acts in bad ways, versus the reluctant hero is a hero who doesn't want to be. But with the reluctant hero, I would say that eventually their character arc kind of forces them to be a hero, whereas the anti-hero can either stay on the heroic path or usually ends up becoming a villain. Like in Anakin Skywalker's case, he started off as kind of a hero and he takes it too far, he crosses the line, and then the end result is him turning into Darth Vader, aka becoming a villain. So I would say anti-heroes have that tendency to become villains, whereas usually the reluctant hero eventually, in most cases, like I would assume that they would just actually get used to the idea of being a hero. So yeah, so that's the reluctant hero. This one is a tier called the anti-villain. I've never heard of this particular trope. I didn't hear the title of it, but the way that Daniel explained it in his video was a villain who is very sympathetic and does terrible things, but like you feel for the villain. And I didn't know that was called an anti-villain, because that happens all the time, and these are my favorite type of, this is my favorite, one of my favorite character tropes of all time, if not my favorite character trope of all time. I mean Zuko, Anakin / Darth Vader, Loki. I would say for me personally, I can't have a good villain. I can't write one if I'm personally not sympathetic with them. So my villain, Skull, is one of those villains that has that sympathetic kind of side where you completely sympathize with the villain, and sometimes it takes it so far as you want to see the villain win over the heroes. So yeah, I would say Zuko and Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader. I would say Damon Salvatore from season 1 of the Vampire Diaries. I would say Klaus Michelson from the Vampire Diaries and the originals is another one. Those are like the best villains of all time, and for me, the best villains of all time are all anti-villains, where they're villains but like you sympathize with them and almost root for them in the circumstances. So this next one is, I don't remember exactly what the technical name of this is called, but it's basically the villain where it's a surprise at the end and, oh, society treated me bad, so that's why I'm bad kind of trope. And I'm going to put this in the C one. Obviously, Zootopia is the main one I can think of this one. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, and I personally don't think I've used it. So that's why it's in C tier, because it's kind of like meh. I personally don't think it's a bad trope, if you will, but I haven't used it, and I don't know of an instance of it being used in a good way besides Zootopia, and that's kind of a kid's movie, so I can't think of like a more adult version of that. So this is the Revolutionaries. This is hard. Okay, I'll organize the things inside the tiers later, but that and the anti-villain and anti-hero are kind of like tied as the top for me. I love a good revolution. Revolutionary War is my favorite war in history, one of my favorite wars in history. You have the Shinsengumi and the samurai from 1868 in the war, the Boshin War in Japan. They were not the revolutionaries to begin with. The rebels were the Satsuma Choshu, and then they rebelled against them, and then they won the emperor's support, so then the Shinsengumi became the rebels, and it kind of flipped it on its head. So those are like real-life historical instances that I love, and I've written so many. The book Rebels is a companion to the book Hunter in my Valiant series. They are rebelling against the government called the RA Tool. I have written the Revolutionary War historical arc, the Shinsengumi arc, all in my historical fiction called Immortal. Jace has been a rebel many times. I use rebellions all the time. In my Game of Lies saga, I haven't done a rebellion outright, but the government is corrupt, and I'm working on kind of figuring that out. I have basically a corrupt government, and the rebels who overthrow them, it's like the best trope ever, and I use it all the time. So this would be the stupid character, and that's a D tier for me. I hate stupid characters. To me, this trope as a stupid character is kind of like well, you know what, I'm going to put it just underneath the villain, where everybody, the society, treated them badly. So for me, an actual stupid character done well is, the one instance I can think of is in Game of Thrones, Hodor. He was mentally challenged, and so at the like he was always that kind of stupid character, and it was done very well. But sometimes it's just not done well very often, and sometimes characters are stupid just to be stupid. For me, that is separated and different than your actual characters making stupid mistakes based on their character flaws, their personalities, that sort of thing. Because for me in real life, we are human and we make mistakes all the time. I know I do. And so for me, I try to reflect that in my characters because they have flaws and they make a lot of mistakes. And so I like characters who make mistakes, but to me, characters making mistakes is different than an actual stupid character who is not intelligent. So for me, a stupid character like Patrick from SpongeBob, I hate SpongeBob and I don't like Patrick. So yeah, fight me in the comments. But so I don't like those truly stupid characters who just are dumb to be dumb. I like the ones that are mentally challenged, or characters that have a deeper meaning behind the unintelligence, like Hodor, and characters that have mental problems, but those are different than just, oh, I'm stupid, you know, just to be stupid. For me, there needs to be like a deeper reason behind it, and it's not one of my favorite tropes, even when it is done well. Like, I like Hodor, but it's just not one of my favorites. So, fish out of water. I'm going to put this in B tier because I feel like it's pretty average. I think it's been used a lot, and from what I remember, from what I can think of, I think it's usually done with female characters, but like I really can't think of any actual examples either. I probably have done this before. I think if it's done in a very, very serious way, it can be done super well and be a really good trope. As I said, I'm kind of biased, and I think it works better with female characters. One of my books called Enslaved, there are 3 different races in the book, and my main character, the female, is like one of the races, and she gets caught up with having to pretend to be a royal in one of the other races, and so she pretends to be, and so she's kind of like a fish out of water because they're a completely different race, they have a different culture. It reminds me of the Esther from the Bible, and being a Jew caught up in like Persia and marrying the king and like the fish out of water. I kind of love those stories, but for me, they work best with a female character in a royal situation that she's not originally a part of, and those are done so good, and that's my favorite. And I'm kind of biased, but like that's kind of some of my favorite. The toxic friend is what this one is. I'm going to put this as C, but I love the way it's done in the Vampire Diaries. And so if we're talking about only the Vampire Diaries version, then that would be definitely up here beneath anti-hero, even above a companion, like a good companion. But I'm going to put it there because outside of the Vampire Diaries, I don't like it. It's just the Vampire Diaries did it really well with 2 characters. Damon Salvatore, he starts off being the villain in season 1, and he kind of grows and eventually becomes more of an anti-hero in the later seasons, but he has this friend named Ezio, I think. No, Enzo. Ezio is from the Assassin's Creed. I was getting names mixed up. But anyway, so he has a friend named Enzo. And Enzo is a bad vampire. He is not a villain, but he's not a hero either. I think he kind of gets villainous a little bit, but he's not one of the main villains. And whenever he gets around Damon, it pulls Damon away from all of the progress that Damon has made in the show. And so Damon just like goes back to being bad again every time he's with Enzo. And it's so bad because basically Enzo kind of drags Damon down, and they end up killing a bunch of people, and he just completely just goes off the bandwagon every time he and Enzo are together. It's a really bad situation, but it's so much fun to watch, and I love the 2 of them together. They have a really good dynamic, and Damon would be better off if he cut ties with Enzo, but like, who wants that to happen, right? Because we love seeing them together.
Like, I did it? Maggie was the hope Enzo clung to. You were mine, and when you didn't notice that I was missing for 5 years, let's just say I held a grudge.
You killed Maggie.
I didn't even bat an eye. My switch was off, Enzo. I did a lot of terrible things. But I didn't do it to make your life miserable from every angle. I did it because I didn't care. Just do whatever it is you gotta do. You wanna kill me? You wanna hate me? Do it. This is between us.
That's the problem, Damon. I don't want to hate you. Because if I hate you, then I have nothing left.
So the toxic friend in real life is a bad thing. You should definitely cut ties with toxic friends who hold you back. I don't like doing it in my own books because I try to reflect real life in my books, and like true themes and stuff. I personally love Damon and Enzo from the Vampire Diaries, so that would be higher, but that's why that's a really low C for me, and I can't hate it because of Damon and Enzo. So next is the monster, and I love me a good monster, I think more than hired muscle. I honestly don't see anything wrong with the monster as character. I love monsters. I love making monsters. I love writing monsters. I love fighting monsters in my books. I love monsters on TV. I love monster movies. Godzilla and all those movies are my some of my favorites. Jurassic Park is some of my absolute favorites. I love Pacific Rim with the aliens. I love I know in one of my books called Son of the Wild, I did a little bit of kind of like my own fantasy versions of dinosaurs, so that was fun. I love just including a good monster in a fantasy because it's a great thing for your characters to have to fight and overcome, so I like monsters more than I like hired muscle, so monsters are great. Next is a lack of communication, and this is a D tier. I hate this so much as a author. I can't even see past it with my author glasses. Like, my figurative author glasses are always on when I see this happening in books or movies, more than often TV shows and movies. So I can't enjoy this as a reader or an audience ever, because for me it literally, bad communication between two characters is most often, about 99% of the time, is a trick to cover up authors doing things out of plot convenience. Basically, you want the plot to happen, so instead of having character A tell character B this thing that would unravel the whole plot, which would make sense because why wouldn't they tell them, you just have them not say anything or not communicate for the whole story, just because you don't want them to communicate, just because you don't want that getting outed, and it makes no sense. It is most often hiding things out of plot convenience because you, the author, want it that way. I have never known an instance where it's used well. I could see it. Daniel in his video brought up how it could be used for a villain deliberately miscommunicating to cause strife and chaos, which is actually a really creative idea. I personally can't think of an instance of that happening or it happening well. Most often it's between a hero and a hero's companion or friends or whatever, and it's just stupid. Like, just talk to each other. Like, it is ridiculous. And I'm like, why aren't you telling him? Why aren't you telling her? And it's very frustrating. Okay, the one instance I can tell it was done good is in the show Reign. So, spoilers for Reign. But basically, Francis, after he became king, he was being blackmailed by a bad guy. And the bad guy was making him do all this bad stuff. And it seemed like to everybody else, including his wife Mary, that Francis was just making all these bad decisions and getting people killed, alienating some of their religious populations, so they were divided between the Catholics and the Protestants, and it seemed like he was persecuting more of the Protestants, and it was causing rebellions, and it was just really screwing up the kingdom. And Francis never told Mary, hey, I'm being blackmailed, I'm not making this decision on my own, I want to be a good king, but Narcisse is making me be a bad king. He never communicated that to her, and if that had been the only reason, that would have been a really crappy thing. But the reason was that Narcisse knew that Francis had assassinated his father, and if Francis didn't obey him, Narcisse could have gone and told everybody, and that would have been regicide, so Francis would have been killed. So if Mary knew, she could say under law that, hey, I never knew about this, and she would be innocent, you know, basically because she didn't know the truth. And so Francis didn't tell her, because if she knew, then basically she would have got her head chopped off along with him, and he was trying to protect her. Still kind of like not the best reason, but it was a good enough reason that it kind of like made sense of the lack of communication between Francis and Mary during that part of reign. And so that's one of the instances that I can see this having been done pretty well. Daniel said in his video, as I said before, that it could be used from a villain's perspective, not communicating to cause chaos. The reign is the only tiny instance that's been used pretty decently, but for me, it's just a disguise to hide authors not wanting something to get outed that logically, why wouldn't the character, like, you have to have a very, very good reason for your characters not to communicate something, especially if it's vital. So this would be the mad scientist, and I love mad scientists more than I love monsters. I think I'm going to put it more than I love. It's pretty even with the companion, but I am a sucker for a good mad scientist. I don't love science per se, but to me it's like that, I don't know, I just love it. And usually for me they're villainous in nature, kind of like the femme fatale for me. So I do, like, from Hunter in Jared's backstory, there's a guy named Nox, or Naix, and he's not necessarily mad, but he is a scientist that's doing crazy things. So, like, you'd have to be mad to do some of the things that he's done. I love it in Experiment, another prequel in the Valiant series. There's another scientist in that one doing terrible things to people. Every time I do this, it's a scientist experimenting on a human being for nefarious purposes. I love this trope. I use it all the time. It's probably a little cliche in my content at this point, but I can't help it. I love it. It's so good. And it's just like the icing on the cake for me, and I get so excited to write them because, like, you don't really have to have a reason to make them a villain at that point because they're just mad. Like, that is the reason. Zagara, I would say, in his backstory, fits that trope, that mad scientist. I know in Daniel's video he mentioned that this could also be witch characters. I don't do witches so much. And I've never, like, in the Vampire Diaries, Bonnie is a witch and she wasn't done crazy. So for me, I think of a male character who is a mad scientist who is crazy or at least sadistic and doing terrible things to people. I love that, and I'm going to admit that here in front of all you guys. So that's that one. This one is my absolute favorite character trope of all time. I just didn't know it had a name, and I didn't know that it was a thing. I just thought I like doing this. So this is the fighter who is pushed to their limits, and I love this. I do this to my poor guy characters especially. I'm a sucker for a guy warrior who has been pushed as far as he can be pushed, and his body is shutting down, his body's in terrible condition. I love, love, love. I love writing that. I love reading that. That's my thing. I'm showing all my true colors to you guys, but I love doing this. So in the Game of Lies saga, my poor character, Bastian, I push him and push him until he breaks, and then I push him a little bit further. In my book, The Mech Soldier, that is kind of the whole point, is that the bad guys pushed his body to the brink and then pushed it further. I did that to the character in Experiment. I did that to Jared a little bit in his backstory. Not as much in Jared because that was the first time I tried to do something similar to it. I did that a lot to the character Rothon in Warrior. I've done that to Aiden when he was a kid. I've done that to most of my characters in the Valiant series during the Dark War. I've done that to Akari. I've done that to, which she was one of the women that I did it to. I've done that to, I think, Shinji. Maybe not Shinji. I definitely did it to Jared big time in the Valiant series, the later books. My bad. So I love this trope. I didn't know it was a trope. I thought it was just me being sadistic and crazy, but now that I know it's a trope, it's definitely my favorite character trope. The fighter, the warrior who is pushed to the limits of what his body can handle. Bastian and Kaldek from Bastian from the Game of Lies saga, and then Kaldek from the Mech Soldier are my two favorites. Jared for me is also a classic from the Valiant series. I can't think of any thing in real life that this happened not in real life, not that my books aren't real or are real, but I can't think of like a movie or TV show. I would say the Rocky franchise. The boxer kind of reminded me. He gets hit a lot, and I think in one of the movies he like starts getting injured and he can't fight, and they kind of push his body a little bit. So I would say Rocky would be one. I can't think of any other thing that really does it to the extent that I do in my books. And I'm not saying I'm the best at this trope. I am a sucker for this. And because I write the books that I want to read, I've done this a lot. I'm not saying I've done it well. I just did it in a way that I wanted it to be done. And so I can't think of anything else that does this. If you can, drop it in the comments below. I would say, you know what? I would say Anakin. Whenever he got burned on Mustafar, I would say that definitely pushed his body to the brink of what it could handle, and then he became Darth Vader and had to live in the suit and stuff. So I would say that's a good example. So that's my absolute favorite. Like, if there could be a tier above S, then this would be above that, and all these would be like A tier, and this would be like down. So I would move everything down because this is a tier. Honestly, this trope is a tier to itself. So next is the old mentor. Iroh being the main one that I can think of. I know Gandalf is one. Obi-Wan Kenobi from the original Star Wars is one. I would say that's just as important as a good companion. I actually think Mad Scientist is going to be below Iroh, so that's actually better. So I would say, yeah, this is definitely looking good. So, yeah, now I think we're good. Well, yeah, now I think we're good. Okay, so yeah, I love, Iroh is one of my favorite characters in the Avatar series. He is one of the best mentors I've ever seen because he is the kind of guy, it was interesting because normally you have that trope with Gandalf and the old wise wizard who is a mentor to the hero. And so you have Gandalf who is helping, you know, the Lord of the Rings characters. You had Obi-Wan who was helping Luke Skywalker. You have Dumbledore who was helping Harry Potter. But for me, Avatar really took this trope and flipped it on its head and twisted it because Iroh is a mentor to the villain originally, Zuko. And he is actually good. So the fact that he's helping the villain really kind of flipped it on its head. And throughout the series, Iroh encounters the heroes in different ways, and he actually gives them wise advice and he helps them. And he's one of those guys that were really, really good and became a mentor to everybody. But he starts off as a mentor to the villain, but in a good way, and he's a good guy. And it was such a twist on the trope. I've never seen it used better than with Iroh in Avatar. So Iroh, best mentor ever. I would say Obi-Wan would be number two. And Obi-Wan is amazing, and I like him, I think, better than Iroh, but I just, in terms of the trope, I feel like they took it completely in a new direction, and an epic one in Avatar with Iroh. So, I'm sorry about this picture. I can't tell if it looks explicit or not. I'm assuming it doesn't, and I don't know what that is. I think that may be King Kong, but this is a damsel in distress, so I'm going to say right above Mad Scientist. Personally, I am a sucker for heroes, people who need to be freed. Obviously, you can do where your hero has to free somebody, so there needs to be somebody to free. Traditionally, the damsels in distress were women, but you will have characters like if a guy gets captured, you can have the guy need to be rescued, whether by a guy character or a, you know, girl character, whatever. So the trope is basically anybody who needs to be rescued, but I personally prefer the traditional damsel in distress, girl needs to be rescued by a guy and they fall in love. But I also love a good damsel where it's a guy captured by an enemy and the woman, I've actually fallen in love with that concept where the mom, the woman, the wife, her husband goes missing and he's a prisoner somewhere and she has to find him. She doesn't know where he is. I really, really love that as well, and I've used both instances, I feel like. And so for me, either version of that trope is so good. It's almost as good as the Revolutionary. I'm kind of like debating about putting it higher, but I would say it is, these are definitely like top tier for me. You know, I may actually put these, I love a Mad Scientist, but like I don't think it's as good as some of these tropes. Like, yeah, I would say yeah, this is definitely, and then Reluctant Hero is going to be with the fish out of water. I think this is better because these I get so like, this is stuff that makes me fangirl. This is stuff that are good tropes, but I don't fangirl as much. These are just okay. These are okay, but more on the negative side of okay, and these I hate. So I think that's kind of the new standard here. So this is all really, really fascinating. So this is the trope where the character, the ultra focused character, so the character who is like obsessed with something. The first thing I can think of is in the anime called Hakoiki, you have the character Sonnen, and he is obsessed with the water of life, which is basically the potion that turns people, humans, into vampire-like creatures called Furies. And after he gets his arm hurt, he becomes obsessed with perfecting it. Right now, if they take it, it has a lot of flaws because it drains their life away. They can have a severe bloodlust and go mad, and he's obsessed with perfecting it and getting back the use of his arm. And so this is like the character that gets narrow focused on one thing and gets really obsessed with it. And I would say it's not something I like, but it's not something I use very often. But like I said, in the case of Sonnen, it was used very well in Hakoiki, and I feel like if you give your character a good reason, any one of these other characters could potentially fit that trope if you gave them a reason to become focused. Villains can become obsessed with their idea of whatever it is they're going after. So like, for instance, in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, Vader was obsessed with finding Kenobi. Reva was obsessed with Kenobi as well. So it's like an obsession. So it's done very well. I prefer when it's done with villains, because villains, like, they're going after your hero and they're like obsessed with going after your hero. That to me is a really good way of incorporating this. It can be done with other characters too. I would say Sonnen is more of an anti-hero character because he does use the water of life to help out himself, his friends, his brothers, the war, help them win the war, but it's kind of like the wrong way to go about it. And so I would say that you could use this really well with villains and anti-heroes, but the heroes themselves can get very narrow focused too and obsessed with something. I just can't think of a superhero or a hero type character who does this, but I would say that I love it most when it's used on villains, secondary with anti-heroes. So the religious zealot, that is D tier for me. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I know religious zealots make really scary bad guys, and that is true. It's done a lot, obviously, in Notre Dame. I don't know that as well. I've seen it a few times, but not the great. It's done in Criminal Minds, is a crime TV show, fictional. And there are several different episodes where the serial killer is some religious nutcase. And it gets really scary really quickly. So yes, they make pretty good villains, but I hate it personally because I am a Christian, and it feels like you're taking my belief system and twisting it, and I hate it because most generally, if you're going to use Christianity in mainstream secular media, you're going to make them a religious nutcase. And it's a bad representation of Christianity. It's a bad representation of what I believe and what most general Christians that I know believe. And it's just, it makes us all out to be crazy. And I hate it with a passion. I am so sick of religious nutcases as bad guys. I hate when they use religion to justify what they do. And I know it does happen in real life that bad things are done in the name of God, and that's terrible. It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible thing that happens in real life. And so I personally feel like you shouldn't really do it in media anyway, because it's a really bad thing to do. You do not slander God's name, and you certainly don't use God's name as a reason for doing very evil things. That is a big no-no. That is not something you should do. That is not something you should really write about. For me, like, I would get the heebie-jeebies writing about this, and I would feel so convicted and guilty. And I don't like doing it again because it just represents Christians as all crazy, crazy nutcases, and we're not like that. And I can't think of a single instance of a Christian character in secular media being portrayed as not crazy. I can't think of a single one. I can think of Christian characters in Christian media, but I cannot think of it done well in secular media. And if you know, if you see one, put it in the comments below. There were several in Game of Thrones where you had the Lord of Light. It was like a reflection of Christianity. They were burning people at the stake. They were going on about the Lord of Light. There was the one religious nutcases that had the multiple gods, so that was a little bit different than Christianity, but the obsession with becoming the government was reflective of like medieval Catholicism, which I'm not Catholic, but I was still offended on their behalf. I hate religious nutcases. I actually hate this more, I think, than if there could be a tier below D, I would put this here because it's a terrible representation of Christianity and it offends me. It offends me so much. So my rant is over. Back to fun stuff. So first of all, this is basically the redeemed hero trope. And I have a bone to pick with Daniel, who created this. How dare you put Kylo Ren here? The best redeemed hero of all time is Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader. It is a shame to put this picture, this face here. Kylo Ren's heroic redemption arc was so bad. It would go here. It would literally go here. Like below lack of communication for me. That's how bad I hate Kylo Ren and his arc. He could have been so good, but they just messed his character up. But the redeemed hero done correctly, like with Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader, is the best character arc of all time. So this is the best character trope of all time. For me, it goes below the pushed warrior because I'm just a sucker for pushed warriors, but this is definitely the best character trope of all time, in my opinion. And the reason being is because of my beliefs, because we as humanity are all sinners, and God came down and died and rose again to save us from our sins, and he redeemed us. We can't redeem ourselves. And so for me, when you have a villain character who's done all these bad things and who gets redeemed in the end, it reminds me that God redeemed us, and it's reflective of the real life love story that we have with God and what Jesus did for us on the cross. And it's such a beautiful thing. That's why I love Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader's redemption arc. Zuko has a really good redemption arc. Damon has a pretty decent redemption arc. I would say Klaus has a fairly decent redemption arc. Kylo Ren obviously didn't. I can't think of any other villains that had a redemption arc, but I know they're out there. So this is the best character trope of all time, in my opinion. I'm a sucker for the pushed warrior. Yeah, so that's Animal Companion. Forgive me, because I thought the companion just counted as him, so just counted as companion. This is basically the human companion, or the humanoid looking companion. This is like a pet companion. And I would, as I said, I count them as like one trope because a companion itself is amazing, but I really, really love animal companions. I'm a dog mom. I have 4 dogs. We have 2 cats. And it's just, I love animals. And so my sister is more obsessed with animals than I am. And I love animal companions. So that's definitely S tier for me. Okay. So this is the chosen one trope. And I'm going to put it there. It's an A tier one for me because it's a good trope. I personally don't like using it, but I mean, the whole premise of the Valiant series is that these are the chosen few. So it's not like chosen one, it's a chosen group, chosen by, my God character, Raiden, to save the galaxy and all that stuff. So I have used it, and it is the main premise of the Valiant series. I just don't like it as much. It's used really good. Anakin Skywalker is literally called the Chosen One directly, so it is a good trope. I just don't use it as much. The only exception I made was in the Valiant series, and I was mimicking the disciples more than I was trying to do a Chosen One trope. It was just like God called the disciples forth to help him, or Jesus called the disciples forth to help him spread the gospel and spread his message and everything else. And that's what I was mimicking with Raiden calling the Chosen, is that he was calling them to help stop corruption and stop the spread of corruption throughout the galaxy. So I was mimicking more the Bible. But technically it counts as the Chosen One trope. It's just I personally don't like it or use it, and I don't count the Valiant series as using it, but it is technically there. So this is my character trope tier. So I think I'm happy with the way this is all arranged. So yeah, so we have the warrior who was pushed to his limits. That's my favorite. That is, I am a sucker for writing those. I write those way too much. The redeemed villain, which is the best of all time. We have the anti-villain, which is a sympathetic villain. We have the anti-hero, which is like a hero who goes too far to do heroic things. We have the humanoid or human companion. We have the pet companion. We have the old wise mentor, the rebellion, rebel leaders, and stuff like that. We have the damsel in distress. Those are all S tier. These things make me fangirl out of my mind, whether I'm reading them, writing them, watching them, whatever. Then we have the chosen one, we have the mad scientist, we have the monster, the hired muscle, we have the femme fatale, and then we've got the focused character, which I think yeah, I think those are B tier. So we've got chosen one, mad scientist, monster, hired muscle. Those are A tier. Those are good tropes. I just don't fangirl over them as much as I do these. And I write them, but these are like always written. These are like sometimes written, but always enjoyed. They're really good tropes. And then B, these are just tropes that are okay, not used by me, not known very often by me either in terms of other stuff. But the femme fatale, the reluctant hero, the focused character, which I'm actually going to put that higher, and then the fish out of water. Good tropes, just average. And then the C tropes are the villain who is a surprise at the end because society was mean to them, the stupid character, and the toxic friend. I'm going to put that before the stupid character. I would actually say, yeah. So I'm going to put that like that. So these are tropes. And I neither hate them nor like them. I just kind of feel meh about them. I still think that this goes here. So I hate this a little less than I hate that. So at the bottom we have the stupid character, we have miscommunication, and we have the religious zealot. And I really wish there was an E tier because the religious zealot would be all the way down here. Those are my character tropes. I hope that you guys have really enjoyed this video and had fun with it, and also had fun kind of hearing about these tropes from the perspective of an author. And let me know if you guys actually did this yourselves and did a video or anything, and let me know if you guys agree or disagree. Drop it in the comments below whether you do or not. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and editing Joanna here. So if you like this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday. And if you want another video to check out, please check out this video here about how to write faster.